Welcome to the StoryCorps podcast edition of the Oral History and Memories of Daniel Timlin, founder of the Advanced Combat Federation and the American Advanced Combat System at the Mid-Michigan Academy of Martial Arts. Hi, we're here with Chris Dobyns, and I'm going to let him speak to you about his relationship with Sifu Dan Timlin.
Hi, I originally started at the Mid-Michigan Academy of Martial Arts when I was in first grade. I was probably about 6 or 7 years old at the time, and I was having some issues with bullying at school. This was something that I think martial arts was something that I had also had an interest in, but I absolutely fell in love with it when I got my training underway. I went through all the ranks from white belt all the way up to black belt, and I was first introduced to Sifu Dan Timlin during my black belt testing, if I'm remembering that right. And I ended up earning my black belt when I was 13. I was at the age where I could start going into the teen adult classes, so I started training with him more on a regular basis at that point. And my training continued on from there. Currently, I'm ranked as a 6th degree black belt in the program, and I am a former senior instructor at the school. I think that's important to note because I have a lot of experience both on the training floor with Sensei Timlin and also off the training floor. Some of the things that I feel that he has really helped me with over the years is not only helping me believe in myself and improve my confidence, but he has really shown me the positive benefits of an excellent work ethic, and he has he really was an excellent role model for me as I was growing up and even into my adulthood. Some of the things that I remember about him and that I'd really like to share is his ability to know how to keep his finger on the pulse of a class. He could walk into a classroom setting and he could know exactly what kind of tone he should take when addressing the group. And there would usually be one of two types. If the group was new students in the class, whether it was new black belts or people coming into a seminar, he would keep a little bit more of a casual tone because he wanted to make sure that everyone felt welcome and felt at ease when in his class in order to get the most out of the class for them. This would also be a time when he would like to share stories about his lineage and his training, which was a great opportunity for everyone to learn about his background, but also learn about his perspective and why he taught what he taught, and what led him, what some of the things were that led him to creating the system that we now have the opportunity to share and have the benefit from. There were other times when he felt that the class needed a little bit of a wake-up call, if you were, where he would have a little bit of a sterner tone. There'd be a little bit more of a disciplined take to the class. These would often be very intense workouts. But they were also an opportunity to motivate us to not rest on our laurels and to really push ourselves out of our comfort zone.
So, Chris, what are some of the things that you remember when it comes to more of a personal relationship that you had with Mr. Timlin, not just here at the dojo, but outside of the school when you did things with him. You know, I know one of the other memories that a lot of people talk about. I know Mr. Caldwell was talking, or Dr. Caldwell was talking about this. Was going to Mackinac. That was one of his favorite memories.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Some of the memories that I have, you know, us being able to train on the beach in Mackinac, and I just, you know, I really enjoyed his sense of humor, and he had an excellent sense of humor, very playful sense of humor, if you will. I was told that I was told by my mom that I had to do X, Y, and Z. Like I had to move a bunch of things. I was helping her out with a project, and I managed to get out of it early. So I rushed to the school after I had already told Mr. Timlin that I wasn't going to be able to make this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know, 25 minutes late or something like that. But it was a 4-hour seminar, so I figured it would be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And I walk in and I bow onto the mat, and you and Mr. Timlin were demonstrating it, and he stops right in the middle of his sentence and he looks over and he says, "Oh, looks like Chris ran away from home again."
Yeah, he used to do stuff like that all the time.
And it was just always a lot of fun to be around him. He was always good at telling stories. He was always good at recalling different experiences and adding humor to it. And again, it was also a really good learning experience for those that were around him because, again, you got like a glimpse into, you know, where he was coming from and what he was thinking about, and why he did some of the things that he did. One of the stories that I really like that he used to tell that was a great example of some of the grace that he would show to people that wouldn't always necessarily deserve grace, was back when he had a school in one of his very first locations. He was putting out advertisements for his school that he had just opened up. It was more of a karate-based program. And he had a couple of guys come in from another dojo in the area. And back then, this was probably mid to late 80s. There was a lot more, martial arts was a lot more political, I think, than it is today. And there was a lot more aggressiveness physically and just confrontationally towards members of other martial arts schools. So he's cleaning up his mats and putting away his equipment after a class. A couple of guys come in, and you know they're being very arrogant and very disrespectful. And even though he knew they were from another martial arts school, and they had announced that they were from another martial arts school, they were doing things that wouldn't be appropriate in martial arts culture, like putting their shoes on the mat, walking on the mat, speaking out of turn. And rather than being aggressive with them, which Mr. Timlin could have done, he chose to be very polite and kill him with kindness, as he used to say. And he showed him around the martial arts school and showed him some of the pads they were working with, which was new to martial arts schools at that time, some of the foam shields and some of the target pads. And as he's talking to him and just kind of hearing out where they were from and what style they had trained in and who their instructor was, he goes to open up his closet, and inside his closet is his uniform, which had his patch on it from his the karate school that he had trained under. And what these two gentlemen didn't realize was not only was he a higher rank of black belt in the same style of martial art that they were training in, but their instructor was actually a student of his instructor in that system.
Yep, I remember that. Yes.
And I also remember an experience when I was training with Mr. Timlin. He was demonstrating a technique that he learned in some of his traditional karate, and he didn't tell me what he was going to do before he did it, which added to the hilarity of the situation. But he had me move around with him as if we were sparring, and he kept telling me to hook kick him. He kept trying to tell me to kick him in the head. So I would throw a hook kick at him, and obviously I didn't want to actually kick him, but he kept telling me to get closer and actually throw it at my head. And 3 or 4 kicks went by, and he just said, "Just treat me like I'm a real opponent and kick me in the head." And so I went to throw a hook kick at his head, and he swept my leg out right from underneath me. I didn't even see it happen. It was like, from my perspective, I go to throw the kick, he ducks down, and then I'm on the floor. And what was even more impressive about this was if you were to see Mr. Timlin for the first time at that time without knowing him or what he was able to do as a martial artist, he was a pretty unassuming looking guy. But what ended up happening is when I threw that kick at him, he ended up doing a low spin kick to my supporting leg and took my leg clear out from under me. There was nothing I could have done to prevent it from happening. He had the correct range down from me to him based on me actually throwing the kick at his head. And he just took my leg right up from underneath me without any trouble. And so that was pretty funny. We actually spent the rest of the class practicing that very same thing. And what's interesting about that is that that's a particular type of technique that you would see in tournaments. And this was also an opportunity for him to, again, explain the technique and how it was used and why it's practical in some respects and not necessarily practical in others. And one of the reasons why we don't traditionally teach is it's not as effective for the street. So this was a good opportunity for him to throw something different at the black belt class and give us the opportunity to practice something new and different while appreciating why we don't always practice it and also understanding what its limitations were. And that was just a fun martial arts experience.
Mm-hmm. I remember he actually used that technique in a tournament years ago when he was in his original traditional style and did that to somebody in a tournament. So same thing, same concept.
Yeah.
That was good.
Let's see.
Okay, Chris. How about some of the important life lessons maybe that you gained from your relationship with Sifu Timlin outside of the school on a more personal level?
Well, one of the things that Mr. Timlin would always say is positive attitude won't do everything for you, but it'll do everything for you that a negative attitude won't. And that was always a quote of his that I enjoyed and that I always try and think about. Developing the attitude of gratitude and being a positive person and focusing on what's going well rather than on dwelling on negative circumstances is always going to help you more than the latter option. He was always a big proponent of being positive, being self-motivated. He would say things like, who motivates the motivator? Rather than trying to find a motivation to pump yourself up from outside sources, which can be good at times to do, you have to be positively motivated yourself, and you have to really be the gatekeeper of your own mental thought process. That was something he was always talking about. He would say things like, what are you focusing on? Always ask yourself, always stop and pause, like, what am I focusing on? Mm-hmm. Because sometimes we can catch ourselves being negative even when we don't realize it, and he would talk about things that he would read, like James Allen's book, As a Man Thinketh. Blessings in the form of fruits and vegetables and flowers and amazing things. But if you're not careful, weeds will always creep in. And, those weeds will...
That's all right.
Those weeds will always, be there. Negative thoughts will always creep in. It's your job as the gardener or the tender of your own mindset to be able to replace those negative thoughts with positive ones. That's something he was always talking about. That and having a goal-oriented lifestyle. It's something that we say at the end of every class. Making sure you plan your work and work your plan. That helps keep you focused. It helps keep you on track. It helps you stay motivated, having your goals written out in front of you and what you want to accomplish, and putting a time frame around those goals so that you know when you want to accomplish what it is you set out to do. He would talk about the value of having self-discipline and having balance in your life. The balance is very important, I think, as a martial artist, not just physically, but also mentally. All pie in the sky and everything's great. You have to be grounded to a certain degree in reality as well. And that helps you problem solve, and that helps you overcome challenges and become a better person. Sometimes you have to put yourself in the butt-kicking machine, as he would say. You have to hold yourself accountable for mistakes that you make or shortcomings that you have, and be willing to take positive action on those things to improve yourself. Those are some of the things that come to mind right now as far as his some of the things that he bestowed onto me that I try and practice on a regular basis. Things that Mr. Timlin had talked about that I remembered. One of the things he often talked about to people that were in the black belt class that had just earned their black belt or just earned degrees of black belt was the importance of open-mindedness. Some of the things that he would say would be, you have to be open-minded as a black belt. The more closed-minded you are, the less you learn. A guy from when I thought about this, this kind of spurred a memory that I had when I was teaching at Mr. Timlin's Academy. And there was a guy that came into the martial arts school, and he had said that he was from a karate school in Detroit. And he was inviting different dojos in to participate in a tournament that he was hosting. And he says that has 27 years of experience in martial arts and a 7th Dan, which for those that don't know is a 7th degree black belt in traditional karate. Well, I was young at the time, and I went to Mr. Timlin, and I didn't really know what to make of this guy, and I told him about what had happened. And Mr. Timlin listened to me, and he kind of looked around the room, and he says, 27 years of doing what? Karate? I did straight karate for years until I realized that there were more martial arts out there and had more options, and there was a lot more to offer. That's the whole reason I created this program. My question is, do you have 27 years of martial arts experience, or do you have 27 years, or do you have 1 year of experience done 27 times? I earned a 5th degree black belt in traditional Okinawan karate, and then I moved to other styles at the age of 17. And so the whole point of him saying that is that, you can't necessarily believe everything that somebody tells you, for one. And I think that was the message he was trying to get across. And then the other thing is you have to look at things from a critical eye and realize that, it's one thing to practice something over and over and over again, but you also have to diversify your knowledge, because otherwise you're not truly becoming a well-rounded martial artist. One of the other things that he would talk about, and there were times when Mr. Timlin could be a little on the crass side, if you will. He would say, you see all these traditional martial artists put on big flowery shows before they get into a fight. But that's all that they've really learned. What was once combat has somehow turned into something about combat over the years. Now, I would rather learn to be able to wipe someone across the mat, and then, when they were a mess on the floor, do some flowery-looking thing at the end. But that's just me. Now, one of the things that he would also talk about, in addition to adding some humor into that, was you never want to mistake movement for achievement. Meaning that, sure, it's okay to do traditional martial arts, it's okay to learn, but eventually you have to really look at what you're learning as a martial artist and ask yourself, is this practical? And do I want it to be practical? And you also have to stay open-minded enough to realize that just because you know how to do something, like you know how to hit pads or you know how to do combinations on the heavy bag, that's not going to make you an excellent martial artist when it comes to defending yourself. You have to be able to understand distance and timing and reaction time and speed and endurance. And so you don't want to, just go through a couple of good rounds on the heavy bag or go through a couple of good rounds on the focus mitts and then get a big ego about it just because you have a black belt around your waist. You want to be able to be open-minded enough to take your skills to the next level. So in the event that you do need to defend yourself, you can really do it with confidence. Now I'm going to jump to a section where he started talking about being a new black belt. And he would say, as a new black belt or a degree of black belts, it's important never to rest on your laurels. And one of the things he would do to teach us this lesson about that is Mr. Timlin would congratulate us once we had earned a new rank or a new degree of black belt. After the warm-up, he would have us strut around the blue part of the mat, the training floor. And he would have us, wave our arms, and have us act really ridiculous, and, he would, clap his hands. He would do things, like that to say, okay, let's congratulate you on your victory. But then he would say, all right, now let's get down to business, and he'd follow it up with a very intense workout. As we would stretch at the end of a class like this, Mr. Timlin would explain how important it was to be open-minded as a black belt. Open-mindedness means that you get to keep learning without becoming too full of yourself. You can never rest on your laurels, he would say, as a black belt. There is a time for congratulations, and there's a time for attaboys, and then there's a time for to refocus yourself and to get serious. And mark my words, this is the only time I want to ever see you strut around the training floor. Black belts are confident, humble leaders. And then the last piece I'm going to talk about is going to be on discipline and how Mr. Timlin would approach that with the students. He would say things like, plan your work and work your plan. Never major in minors. Too many people walk around miserable because they focus on the time in their lives on the wrong things. If you do that, you wind up becoming a walking generality. Chronically negative and pessimistic, like a walking shit magnet. You have to set goals, and you have to reset them to keep yourself focused. Break them down into bite-sized chunks. Reward your efforts from time to time. Always ask yourself, what am I focusing on? If what you're focusing on at the time when you ask yourself and then answer it isn't what you want, then you have to start focusing on something else. Be a possibility thinker. If you don't know what to do in a certain situation, ask yourself, if I knew what to do, what would I do? And the whole point, I think, that Mr. Timlin was trying to make with that is that you have to you have to be willing to be self-reliant, and you have to be willing to take risks, calculated risks, when it comes to achieving your goals or getting what you want. And you don't have to be worried about failing, because if you fail in an endeavor, it's just an opportunity on how to do it differently the next time around. It's a learning experience. It's all about your mindset, and that's a big part of what Mr. Timlin taught me over the years, and how important it is to have a positive mindset versus a negative mindset. He would always quote the book, As a Man Thinketh, although jokingly he would call it As a Man Stinketh if you read it while you were on the toilet. He would quote things like, your mind's like a garden, and you have to cultivate it, because a garden, regardless of what you put in it initially, is going to fill with weeds over time. So you need to make sure that you are disciplined with your mind, just like you'd be disciplined with your body. You have to make sure that you ask yourself what you're focusing on and if it's correct. And you have to make sure that you're constantly reminding yourself of the positive things and the things that you're grateful for in life. Because regardless of how things are going, negative thoughts are always going to creep in. You have to be the gardener of your own mindset. So those are just some things that came to me that Mr. Timlin has taught over the years, and I hope you enjoyed it.
This edition of the StoryCorps podcast of the oral history and memories of Daniel Timlin was produced by the Mid-Michigan Academy of Martial Arts, producer Tammy Timlin, and edited by Ricky Caldwell.